Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here we find further description about how the varieties of manifestations, creations happen one after another. And these creations first began in the universal body of the Lord, the Virata Rupa of the Lord. And when it appeared in the Virata Rupa, then the controlling deities who control the varieties of sense organs of the living entities simultaneously also became manifested, and these different senses in the living entities also became manifested. Just like we saw today, if we are able to see, it is because first the Lord in His universal form decided to see. When the Lord was lying down in His Virata form and He desired to see, then the sun appeared as the eyes of the Supreme Lord. That is the deity which is controlling our eyesight. So, along with that, the faculty to see in this material world originated. Similarly, next it is said, when in the Virata Purusha, the skin was manifested, then the varieties of herbs, drugs, medicines, all these things became manifested in this universe. And similarly, for living entities, hairs became manifested. So in one understanding, just like for this universe, these different vegetations are like the hairs. It's like on our body there are hairs. So the demigods who control our touch sensation are the one who controls the production of herbs and these medicinal drugs. You see. So that is how they also became manifested. And next, when the Supreme Lord wanted to generate population in this material world, the Virata form of the Lord developed the facility of genitals and semen, retaha, that is a Sanskrit word for semen. Actually, the facility of sex life is given for procreation. This is Very important to understand. And that is how you find, along with the semen, the Prajapatis were generated. The one who are going to increase the population in the universe, they appeared. So, and along with this, the Lord who resides over water, He also appeared. And then it is explained, when the Lord in His universal form wanted to evacuate, then Anus appeared. And that is considered, in Bhagavatam it is explained, that is a place, that outlet for evacuation of that universal form is the abode of Yama, controlling deity of death. And the rectum of the Lord is the place of envy, misfortune, death, and hellish life. So all these things also appeared in this universe, along with the anus which appeared in the, which became manifested in the universal form of the Lord. Now this is very important, which Prabhupada is pointing out here, two very important things. In the translation, Prabhupada points out that semen is the faculty which is created for procreation. And in the purport, Prabhupada points out that one should not discharge the semen unnecessarily, because immediately after Retaha, this faculty, then next which appeared was Mitra, the personified deity of death, which appeared. So, excessive releasing the semen unnecessarily, it quickens our death. The more person unnecessarily releases the semen, which is actually very important substance, which has so much potency that it can give life. It can create another life, because in that the soul is carried to the womb of the mother. So, if that is unnecessarily wasted, then one is inviting his death very soon. This has to be understood. So, these 2 points Prabhupada is mentioning very nicely here. So, there is another verse which comes in the description between when Maitreya Rishi and Vidura are discussing the same subject of creation. So there, Maitreya Rishi explains very nicely, and in the purport, Prabhupada explains this very nicely. So this is from the verse in 2nd Canto. From the Lord's genitals originate water, semen, generative, rains, and the procreators. So all these things are generated. Prajapatis, procreators are Prajapatis. What all is generated? Water, semen, all kinds of creations. This is called generatives, sarga, rains, and procreators. And then, next, that verse says, his genitals are the cause of pleasure that counteracts the distress of begetting. Now, because the Lord wants to satisfy the desires of living entities to come in the material world and enjoy independent of the Supreme Lord. Now the Supreme Lord has to send the living entities in the material world. So this is the process He has created. How the living entities come into this material existence. So the process is, they will enter into the semen, and then through the semen they will enter into the womb. And for that, the Lord has created a kind of a pleasure in that process which counteracts the distress of begetting. Because to beget a child, it is lot of distress for the whole family. For the child who is going to be in the womb of the mother for months together, for the mother herself, so much of distress, even when the child is born. But all this distress is counteracted by that small pleasure which the Lord has put in that process of copulation, discharging the semen. You see. Otherwise, nobody would enter household life. If only distress was there, if there was no enjoyment at all, who would like to get married and maintain a huge family? Why would one like to maintain? Isn't it? If there was no pleasure involved. So the Lord, in order to satisfy the desires of the living entity, has added that little pleasure. So in the purport, Prabhupada explains this very nicely. The genitals and the pleasure of begetting a child counteracts the distress of family encumbrances. One would cease to generate altogether if there were not, by the grace of Lord, a coating, a pleasure-giving substance on the surface of generative organs. If this pleasure was not there, Prabhupada is saying that there is no possibility that one would like to enter into a family life. There was no possibility. So actually that is how it is said, that family life is a concession for one for whom it is difficult, that he cannot control his senses. This substance gives a pleasure so intense that it counteracts fully the distress of family encumbrances. Person is so captivated by this pleasure-giving substance, he is not satisfied by begetting a single child, increases the number of children with great risk in regard to maintaining them, simply for this pleasure-giving substance. This pleasure-giving substance is not false, because it originates from the transcendental body of the Lord. In other words, the pleasure-giving substance is a reality, but it has taken an aspect of pervertedness on account of material contamination. In the material world, sex life is the cause of many distresses on account of material contact. Therefore, sex life in the material world should not be encouraged beyond necessity. Only for necessity, sex life is required, not for enjoying. This substance was not created for so-called enjoyment. So today, the process of trying to see that one discharges semen and there is no birth is demoniac, because that is not the purpose for what it was given. You see. So today, people are utilizing this faculty which the Lord originally gave for material enjoyment, and there is a risk involved. That is what it is said in today's purport. The risk is, the more a person tries to enjoy and discharges semen, he is actually inviting his death nearer and nearer. Because that is how this faculty is created. There is a necessity for generating progeny even in the material world, but such generation of children must be carried out with full responsibility for spiritual values. So one procreates so that he can give a chance to that living entity to be born and to become free from the entanglement of birth and death. It is very important. Just like if you go through the chapters where Kashyapa Muni and Diti, they begot Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. There it is described that the mental status of both Kashyapa Muni and Diti were not proper. Diti was very lusty and Kashyapa Muni was very angry at that time, because he did not want to have. He warned Diti, this is not a proper time. So because of his that kind of status of mind, the semen which he discharged invited that kind of soul. See how much important it is. So that is why Garbhadana Samskara is recommended, that when a person is planning to have a child, then he must have a proper mind, situation of mind that is required. So then, when a person plans like this, then a suitable soul is sent as his son or his child. You see how much scientific we can see all these things are there. So people don't care nowadays about all these things. And in today's purport, Prabhupada is explaining how if one can somehow or other save his semen, then this semen actually, instead of going and flowing down, it nourishes his brain. And his life span is increased. So Prabhupada is saying in the purport, it is understood herewith, faculty to discharge semen is the cause of death. Therefore, yogis and transcendentalists who want to live for greater spans of life voluntarily restrain themselves for discharging semen. So this is a tapasya, it is required. So this little tapasya will save us from different kinds of diseases and uneventful death, which we quickens by unnecessarily discharging our semen. The more one can restrain the discharge of semen, the more one can be aloof from the problem of death. There are many yogis living up to 300, 700 years by this process. And in the Bhagavatam it is clearly stated Discharging semen is the cause of horrible death. The more one is addicted to sexual enjoyment, the more susceptible he is to a quick death. So if somebody is very much agitated by sex life, then he should understand he will die very quickly. He is inviting his death very nearer. So, there is a very interesting discussion which happened between Shaunaka Rishis and Suta Goswami. So Suta Goswami was explaining about the life of Maharaj Parikshit. So Shaunaka Rishi, he very nicely explains, very beautifully, what he understood as a gist. So he says that even though Maharaj Parikshit's life was very short, he was going to die within 7 days. Nevertheless, because he decided that whatever balanced time he has got, he is going to utilize it by hearing Krishna Katha without interruption. His life was glorious. And then he says very nicely, the sun in this material world, both by rising and by setting, it takes away the life of everyone except for one who is engaged in hearing Krishna Katha. So, this is very, very important. Even though, let us say for example, it is said here that one can prolong his life. What is such a great use of prolonging the life? If the life is not utilized properly, what is such a big deal in prolonging the life? Isn't it? So you can see how beautifully, systematically Shaunak Rishi addresses this point. So first he talks about the important decision of Maharaj Parikshit, that 7 days he had fully utilized in Krishna consciousness. Every moment he planned to be Krishna conscious. Did not want to waste his time by drinking, sleeping, eating, anything. All the necessities of life he gave up. Just utilized his time fully in Krishna consciousness. So he said that life is very glorious. Otherwise, he says, otherwise, every rising of the sun, every setting of the sun decreases our life, except for one who utilizes that time in hearing the glories of the Lord. Then someone may argue, that famous shloka comes later on, says, someone may argue that no, life's important part is not meant for philosophical discussion. It is meant for prolonging our life more and more, so that I can enjoy eating, sleeping, mating, all these things. One may argue, isn't it? Because Shaunak Rishi has said, life is taken away by rising and setting of the sun, except for one who is interested in hearing Krishna Katha. So someone may argue, no, life interest should be to increase the lifespan more and more so that I can enjoy nicely eating, sleeping. So then, that famous shloka he says, Tarvaha kim na jivanti. What is the use of prolonging the lifespan without spiritual values? This is very important. Without spiritual values, what is the use of prolonging the life? Tarvaha kim na jivanti. Aren't there trees who are living for millions of years? There are trees living for 500 years, 5,000 years. So Prabhupada in that purport gives the example, Imli Tala, there is a tree living from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. In Calcutta Botanical Garden, there is said to be banyan tree living for thousands of years. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived only 48 years. Shankaracharya lived very few years, I think 30, 40 years. So Prabhupada says, do you mean to say these trees' life is more important than short life of Shankaracharya and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? So prolonged life without spiritual values is no use. Then Prabhupada explains, someone may argue, no, what are you saying? These trees are not living. Where? They are not breathing. Without breathing, where is their life? They are not breathing. We are talking about life which is filled with breathing. Isn't it? So Shaunak Rishi says, then what is the value? First of all, Prabhupada explains in that purport that this is misunderstanding, first of all, that trees are not living, even trees are breathing. And Dr. Bose, he showed from his experiments, yes, trees also breathe. That is first of all. But even if one thinks, okay, they don't breathe like us grossly, so then Shaunak Rishi says, don't you think the bellows of blacksmith is breathing more heavily than you? Isn't it? That also makes a lot of sound. You can see that. Blacksmith's bellow. Bas, bas, bas. So they are also breathing. So breathing is not just a life. So then someone may argue, no, it's not just the breathing. Who is saying breathing is life? Breathing and along with that, eating and mating. Enjoying our eating and enjoying discharging the semen. Sex life. That is life. So then he says, so first he says, Tarvaha kimna jivanti. Are the trees not living? Long life? But if someone says, no, tree, that is not life. Breathing is life. So then he says, Bhastra kimna shvashanti utaha. Is it not said that bhastras are also breathing? The blacksmith's bellow, they are also breathing. So is that life? So then someone will say, no, it is eating. Enjoying our eating and enjoying sex life, that is life. So then he says, Na khadanti na mehanti kim gramo pashuvo pare. Have you not seen that in the village nearby there are grama pashus? They are also khadanti. Are they not discharging semen? Are they not eating? Isn't it? So this life without spiritual values is like animal life. So, the whole idea is to understand the importance of this human life, save our energy, save our time, utilize properly every moment and become successful in Krishna consciousness. That is a great gift. Specifically in this Kali Yuga, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has been very merciful. Lot of concessions are given, and even after all these concessions, if we don't utilize our human form of life properly, then knowingly we are committing suicide. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।